It's really allowed me to grow my social circle and my group of friends, having relocated from Sydney to London in late last year, and finding a community that's not just about being LGBTI, not just about gaming, but at the intersection of those two things, isn't something I've experienced before. So it was an amazing thing to find out that we could do here in London.
When I moved to London a few years ago, I found London Gaymers through Reddit and subsequently their Facebook page. I spent a lot of time in my bedroom playing video games and one person asked me about I was not comfortable with who I was. They are sometimes the most effective tool for me to manage to bring me out of my shell, make me more comfortable with who I am.
Having London Gaymers as a community, I think is really important, both within the LGBT community and the gaming communities. It's really important because it gives people that might feel like they're outcasted slightly or ostracized slightly, or that's sort of that nerdy overtone that is often it's sort of raised a little bit in the mainstream. It is the friends that they can have. It is me, a community of people that I can join in with, that I know will have the same stress as I do. I know they're using to new things. I know they'll take on exciting new journeys.
And the reason I think it's so important for our community as a whole is because I think we need groups like the London Gaymers who are representing the entire breadth of our community to kind of bring us all together in a way that is respectful and allows us to be ourselves.
And that's why something like London Games is really important to have. It gives us a place to call home. It gives us a community of people that we can very easily build long-lasting friendships with.
I'm comfortable with the person to naturally avoid situations to really go up into new events and meet some new people. I hopefully make some new friends wherever I am.
Whilst, kind of adhering to things like safe spaces and respect for one another.
London Games gave me this brand new friendship group, and I was able to do it so quickly. And these are long-lasting, meaningful friendships with people that genuinely have the same interests as I do.
London Games does that in such an amazing way, and it's been great to be part of that community.
Great, so in case you guys didn't quite catch that, do you guys want to introduce yourselves and then tell us a little bit about what is London Games Network?
Yeah, sure. My name is Raphael. I'm one of the admins for London Gamers.
Yeah, my name's Curtis, and I'm also an admin and the co-founder of London Gamers.
Hi, I'm Anna. I work in gaming. I work in QA at Media Molecule and have been working in gaming for the past couple of years.
My name's Jessica Saunders. I'm the director of Salix Games, but I'm previously a AAA sound designer for titles such as Batman Arkham Knight and Fable.
My name's Justin Mabubian James. I'm a member of the London Gamers and occasional games journalist.
Hi, I'm Astrid Johnson. I'm a games journalist. I am the editor-in-chief of Indie Haven, and I do freelance for Waypoint, GamesIndustry.biz, and the Morning Star.
Fantastic. Had a lot of knowledge up here. Definitely. So, do you want to tell us sort of when did you begin?
We began 5.5 years ago, roughly, and since then we've just kind of blossomed into a really fantastic place for people to create new friendships, communities, find people who share similar interests and feel comfortable in a safe space, which we just felt was really important. And over the last 18 months, we've really been expanding that sort of reach, as we just noticed that so many people really wanted to join a group like this, and we just didn't know how to reach them. So over the last 18 months, we've had a really big push at helping to find and reach more of those people.
And how did you guys meet?
well, technically, we met.
On Twitter.
Well, we met on Twitter. No, when we started to do this panel, we immediately thought, well, this isn't just about how the London Gamers are, a part of the London community and the gaming community, but also a part of the state of the industry, if I can use that term, and how we can help LGBT gamers just feel more comfortable, and what can game developers and producers and designers do to help that. So we put a call out to people who could help us to tell that message more clearly than we could, and we thought these guys were fantastic guys to give that opinion. So yeah, really, really grateful to have you here on the panel with us today.
And in terms of sort of the organisation as a whole, how has the network grown over time? I guess you started out maybe just a couple of you, and then you've sort of grown it to include more events.
Yeah, it was exactly that actually. Say 5 years, 4 years ago, it was quite a small group, and it was only, like I say, maybe 18 months ago when we were about 150 members, and now, a year and a half on, we're 10 times that size. Which just proves to us, I guess, that there are people who want to find a group like this to relate to. And it's always been that kind of case of, for us, the combination of being LGBT, you can often feel like you don't belong to certain cliques. Being a gamer, you can often feel a little bit siloed. And then, in a big city like London as well, if you don't live here natively, those three things compound together to just create this quite nervous environment if you don't have some place to feel like you fit in and belong, which is why we're here.
And obviously it's sort of central to London, but do you have people coming in from other areas?
Yeah, so one thing we found right away was that we had people, I know people that take trains from Wales. We have members all over Europe as well. So we had the World of Warcraft pub quiz, and someone flew in from Sweden for it. And so, yeah, I think that's testament to how much this means to people and how much something like this is needed within the gaming community. So, yeah.
And so, do you remember when you started what kind of games you were playing then, and obviously what are you doing now?
We tend to kind of go, we do online and offline games. So online we play pretty much everything. I think we really like Overwatch at the moment, World of Warcraft, that kind of thing. But offline we just tend to do more social things like you saw in the video. The idea is to take something that is inherently asocial, like playing video games, and make them a social event. So we go out we do events where we bring people together to play.
It's a fantastic idea, definitely. You must have, obviously then, quite a few stories from some of the previous events.
Yes.
Can you guys tell us any of those?
Oh my goodness, which one?
The good ones, only.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of which one. Talking of events, this is definitely not a subtle plug, but we're actually running an event straight after MCM today, which is our Halloween sort of gaming bar day. And we do those quite regularly, sort of every month, every 2 months. And those are really good ways for people to just come to a completely free event, play some games, enjoy some stuff together. Yes, I guess that's one such thing that we do, which we've got one of tonight. So if you do want to come, please do come along to that after. I think some details at the end of the presentation about that.
Yeah.
So.
And why do you think it's important to have a hub specifically for the LGBT gaming community?
I think we're going to discuss that in the panel later, but I think in short, I think it's, as was discussed in the video, I think they're quite two interesting communities where you have people that don't feel themselves either represented or reflected in the wider LGBT community, as nerds or geeks or whatever the case may be, and then you have, in the other sense, the gaming community, particularly online, isn't the most inclusive place in the world, and I think creating that mesh between the two, that safe space, is really interesting and appreciated. So.
And I understand you guys went to Pride this year, is that
We did,
right?
yeah.
How was that?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, almost as scary as being sat up here. That was really good. We've wanted to do it for some years, and the amount of people said to us, "Can we march this year?" We were like, "Absolutely! If you guys want to, then that's what we'll do." It was fantastic, really good fun, and we'll definitely do it again next year, and probably bigger and even better than it was this year. Really fantastic to just have a group of people around you that all feel the same way as you, that are all celebrating your diversity with you. Is really empowering. It's really fantastic.
Fantastic. So I know, Raphael, you've got some specific questions you might be able to shed a bit more light for our audience here.
Yeah, so before we kick off the panel discussion, I wanted to do a really brief history of representation in video games within LGBT representation. So I have some slides to show you. Now, I promise they're not the most loveliest thing in the world.
This guy clicking too much, aren't you?
My clicker isn't working. Oh yeah, it is. Is it? So that's us. That's us. Yeah, sorry, I clicked too much. Yeah, that's us online. That's our World of Warcraft group when we go down at the last raid, which is that's me on the left, the Tauren, and then that's us on the social night. The idea is we do online and offline. We emphasize that because we have some gamers that are much more confident socializing online, and people that want to meet in person as well. So we do both. Right. So again, this is going to be a really quick whirlwind. It doesn't cover every game, but I did a bit of research to kind of contextualize what we're on about. The very first recorded notable character in a video game that was identifiable as LGBT was Vivian in a game called Moon Mist. It was a text-based game, so I don't have a screenshot of Vivian, but there were references in the game that alluded to the fact that I think she was in love with another woman. You go to the year after that, and you have Eagle in Street Fighter, who wasn't identifiably gay in the original Street Fighter that he was in, but in subsequent evolutions of the game, it came out that he was, and he was apparently a really big Freddie Mercury fan, which is interesting. This is, I think, the most fascinating example that I think kind of puts everything together that I think we should discuss today. Super Mario Bros. 2, when this game came out, Birdo, in the original Japanese manual for the game, back when games had cool manuals that you could keep, Birdo was listed as a boy who thought he is a girl and spit eggs from his mouth. That's what the Japanese version of the game said. That's the English version of the original posting. When the game made itself available in America, Nintendo America changed that. They removed that context and they removed any reference to the fact that Birdo is actually trans. So arguably, Birdo is the first case of transgender representation we have in video games, which I think is really cool. But it also leads to the discussion of censorship in different countries and the need to address that. We had Poison in Final Fight, which she's amazing, she's a badass. In Japan, she was identifiable as trans. However, Japanese people were worried that men beating up a woman in a game was an issue, so they actually removed that from the American context. And yeah, it's just, again, this issue of like miscommunication between different cultures. So this is my favorite one. So in 1994, Streets of Rage 3, which is an amazing game. In Japan, the very first boss was named Ash, which was a really camp guy with leather, and he had the most effeminate attacks ever, and it was a really big stereotype on what LGBT, particularly gay men, are. However, he was removed as a boss in the American version of the game. He was made into an unlockable player. Yeah. Earthbound, really cool game. So Tony is in love with Jeff, and we don't actually know that he's gay. He just says that he really likes Jeff a lot, and he really hopes Jeff likes him, that kind of thing. Fallout 2, if you picked Chitsa, you were able to have a same-sex marriage, which is cool. A bit of a shotgun wedding, but... Juhani in the Knights of the Old Republic was, you could, if you were a female, you could, I guess the term they used in the game was romancer. I don't like it, but you can make her fall in love with you. Like, you could interact with characters romantically, and she was open to same-sex ones. Bill in The Last of Us is gay, which is cool. And yeah, this one's really interesting to me. So Destiny, I don't play Destiny, but Destiny apparently, this Oryx, the Taken King, is transgender. So born designated female at birth, he became a man when he did some kind of power thing where he became the king. And but that content and that story is not, you won't know that if you just play the game. You have to read it on the Bungie website, which is kind of weird. And the last one, the big one that everyone knows about, our favorite player in Overwatch, Tracer, it was announced that she has a girlfriend. However, as you all know, this was announced on the online kind of comic. Yeah, the comic, not in the game. Again, if you're playing the game, you will not know she's lesbian, which I think is an interesting conversation to have. Yeah, so that's just the whirlwind. I think kind of 5 key kind of takeaways, my thoughts anyway, and I'm sure the panel will have thoughts on it in a bit, is I think a couple of points of discussion. Number one is, I think LGBT characters, historically anyway, more so historically, were used for like comedic value. Like we saw Ash in Streets of Rage is a bit of a fun kind of, like he's just like a stereotype basically, and it's kind of funny to have him on there. It was never taken seriously. Number two, the different censorship in different countries. So what's okay in Japan isn't okay here, isn't okay in America, that kind of thing. Number three is the massive stereotype of what the LGBT community represents, which I think needs to be addressed. Number four is keeping the identity of LGBT characters hidden, particularly from people playing the game. So it's like developers take credit for having a gay character, but they don't want you to know they're gay. Yeah. It's weird. So it's like they'll come and tell you in an interview, oh yeah, that person was technically gay. But it's like, well, as a user, as a player, I don't know that. So that's an issue. And then the last one is that the LGBT characters tend to be sideline stories. They never tend to be the main act. And it's like either they have no contribution to the main storyline of the game, or their role is quite minimal. Yeah, and then the next bit I wanted to mention, so that's kind of the representation. The next bit, which I won't touch too much on, is like looking at homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia and video game culture. There was a survey that was done in 2006, which is the last survey I could find on this exact subject. And someone in America by the name of Jason Rockwood basically did a gay gamer survey, and he sent it out and he got thousands of responses, which was the biggest of its kind. And that asked this particular question. And the question was, which of the following forms of homophobia have you experienced, either online or offline? 87.7% of gamers with the Y reported that they hear the phrase used, "that's so gay," quite often online. And 83.4% of players heard people use the word gay or queer in a derogatory manner, either towards them or to other players. And I think, again, we'll pick this up in the panel, but I think it's really interesting to kind of talk about the two, so the lack of representation or the inaccurate representation, and then also the culture that surrounds those games of gamers and kind of the need to address them. Yeah. I'll save that for later. Actually, we could go straight to this clicker is really slow, by the way. All right. Yeah, should we do a panel introduction? We did that already. Yeah. I swear I'm clicking it. Oh, right, there it goes. All right, so I think the first question that I wanted to ask the panel is around this idea of like, what is a gamer? And I kind of wanted to ask about asking you guys about, to share your stories about either growing up LGBT, playing video games, assuming you did growing up, and kind of like the role that video games had on your life, or the impact they had on you, and what you think that means to you today.
Who wants to take that first?
I can go.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, there's kind of like two things. When I came to terms of being gay myself, it was, I think, more TV and films that helped me come to terms with it. So LGBT content and characters in gaming were more like when I was already fine with it, but in the closet, so not out. And I think that helped me. Just one of the examples is just playing Borderlands with my brother, who I was not out to, and just playing with him, playing co-op, and just seeing casually mentioned that Sir Hemlock is gay, for instance, and it's just like me kind of like testing the water, seeing how he reacted to a gay character in gaming, and just seeing like, oh, is he gonna say something about it? Is he gonna point it out? Kind of like just getting real quiet on TeamSpeak and just being like, okay, well, what's the reaction? So I think this is how characters helped me kind of test the waters, and also, of course, just having visibility and being represented is always a good feeling. But yeah, in terms of coming out, I think that helped me.
I suppose I could interject. So when I was younger, probably about 12 or 13, I played Jedi Academy, which had sort of a not particularly good but usable online section function. I was a member of a clan, and I wasn't out to anyone at this point. I was still very much in the closet. And I developed this friendship with another Sith Lord across the Atlantic. And it turned out, after we had quite a few conversations, it turned out he was gay, I was gay, we told each other. We had this sort of budding online romance. And then it came to telling the clan, and I was really nervous about it, and told them, and a couple of the members of the clan got really antsy about it and were, quite homophobic. But what was amazing to me at the time, as a kid, was that the vast majority of them were incredible and defended me. And this is probably back in 2002, 2003. And it was an amazing experience. It showed me what online communities in gaming had the potential to do. They had the potential to be nurturing and protecting. It allowed me to express a part of myself that I couldn't in my real life, in the real world, in gaming. But since then, it's been a bit more of a problematic relationship with being a gamer and playing online games. I'm sure that anyone who plays online competitive games will have heard 1,000,001 slurs. It's quite a toxic environment often, especially if you're LGBT. So it's become a bit more troubled as I've grown up, but definitely that was a formative experience.
Cool. I suppose I'll come in now. So, video games didn't really have a part in the formation of me coming to terms with being pansexual and trans. It was actually a few friends from school convincing me to join Tumblr because it was this new cool thing that everyone was getting into. And I honestly don't recall, in my experience anyway, with the games that I was playing, seeing that many LGBT depictions, and I was, as a result, through the media that I consumed, because games was the primary piece of content that I enjoyed, was a bit of a late bloomer as a result. And it wasn't until I joined these online social circles like Tumblr that were a little bit more socially aware. I don't use it as much now, but it wasn't until then that I started having these realizations. I honestly do think if video games had that representation more so, especially in the ones that I played, the original Mass Effect wasn't particularly good with it. I think the only other game that had a bit of an impact on me when I was younger was Fable 2, and that had elements of representation, but it was an optional player choice. But I honestly do think if more of those representations were there, I probably would have come to these realizations a lot sooner. There was a lot of internalized feelings, and it's nice to see that games are doing it a little bit more now, but certainly back then it wasn't something I really noticed a lot.
I think mine was probably The Sims, actually.
Oh, yeah.
It's on The Sims that I was like, can I date this other man? And then when you click on the bed and you click woohoo, and it worked, I was like, oh. And it was just kind of quite empowering that a game allowed me to do that. And that was one of my earliest memories of that sort of thing.
It's funny because Fable 2 also, I'm polyamorous as well, and Fable 2 was certainly a way of you being able to, let's all go to the bedroom. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was permissible in social situations. But yeah, I honestly do think Fable 2 was probably the best thing I had back then.
Jessica, do you want to?
I was saying my story is actually quite similar to yours. The video gaming representation was so minor for me growing up. I'm going to show my age a little bit. It wasn't Tumblr for me, it was early days of LiveJournal. And those kind of forums and fandoms and things, and kind of got to experience things that way and coming to it. But again, it was things like I could have a wife in Fable, and even Liara bored me to tears in Mass Effect. She was still a romance option. It was just like
it was something at least.
It was something, and it was.
See, I made the mistake of killing. I kept Ashley alive, and that was a mistake.
Yeah, Ashley was just a bit racist, really, wasn't she?
She was terrible.
A whole other panel.
Space racist.
That was a mistake. I should have kept Caden alive.
But it was. Yep, same.
But yeah, so you had to say. So as I come a bit older, I started playing more of these games. They got the Fallouts, and you could start. And it was just kind of interesting because, my longer-term relationships. I'm a bisexual woman, so my longer-term relationships have always been with men, and it's kind of I'll be talking with my friends who are playing the game, and it's like, oh yeah, I married Meryl, and they're like, that's a woman, and I'm like, yeah. And they always get really confused, and it's just again, it's this whole kind of, as we talk about the bi-erasure, and it's this thing, and it's just again, so for me, that's the big issue, is just talking through representation. We exist. We know we're here.
So,
hello.
Thank you. So, okay, moving on from so that was a bit more about your personal stories growing up and the connection you had to video games, or the role they play or didn't play. So I think the most important question now is to move on to the industry itself. I mean, I gave you some examples of some LGBT characters, some of them executed, I think, quite poorly on the developer side. This idea that it's like developers want to attract a mass audience and they don't want to put people off by having, you know, someone be openly lesbian or whatever. But at the same time, they want to be inclusive to the LGBT community, so it's like they want their cake and to eat it as well, whatever the phrase is. So what are your thoughts on like the state of it at the moment, the state of the industry in terms of both LGBT representation in video games and then the culture around it?
That's completely it. That's it in a nutshell. I think a lot of it's to do with the games press at the moment, and just the press in general. It's quite cruel out there. Like people are very terrified to post things, to put their games out there, to step a single foot wrong, because if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, that could be your career over. There is a large movement that, you know, people come for blood, and, you know, people can go out there with the best intentions, but, you know, you step a foot wrong and that's it. And so you have to be very careful about how you put your game out there, how you do things. Like with the game I'm making at the moment, like we were so terrified about putting certain things forward that we kept everything hidden, or we're being really coy with things, and then just from a marketing perspective, and then we started like saying, oh no, but the feminists are going to hate us for this, and these people are going to hate us for this. But then we started pushing out things and like, oh, actually people like this, and they like this, and we can start talking about more and more things. And I think especially the larger companies, when so much money is when you've got these 20, 50, $100 million products, and they've got so much riding on it, and you've got their huge audiences, that 100 million people could turn around and say, I'm not going to buy this game because the lead is a homosexual male. They panic. They absolutely panic.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that vitriol you hear on the press. As soon as Tracer was announced as being LGBT, I mean, if you stumbled onto the wrong forum...
Oh, absolutely.
It was not a nice place to be. And, you know, a big company like Blizzard can afford to make that brave decision and can afford to do that. And Naughty Dog, another great one. You know, The Last of Us is a great example.
It just needs more of it. It needs more of the bigger companies just taking that step and saying, we don't care about... It's essentially, I think it's the vocal minority. I think it's a very loud group of very angry people. Yeah. But I don't think they really will impact sales that much.
And, I spoke to, you mentioned Tracer was in that presentation, and I spoke to Jeff Kaplan. I interviewed him about a year ago, specifically on the issue of her being a lesbian and then announcing it. And I think one of the problems we have here is that what they did, there was a soft launch essentially of her sexual preference. It's not nothing in game, nothing in lore. It's only in the comic book, and the reason that was given, one of the reasons, which I'm not sure I necessarily buy, is that Overwatch is a global product, as many games are now, introduced to a lot of territories, and companies, and specifically Blizzard in this case, were slightly worried about how that would impact Overwatch's presence in different countries and different territories where it was being released.
Yeah, because Russia banned the comic, didn't they?
Yeah. And it's companies need to be brave enough to say, well, this is our product and we believe in it and we believe in the message it's giving across, rather than necessarily segueing content, isolating it from the game itself and putting it somewhere else. It's good that the representation is increasing, but they need to, I think, commit more to in-game content.
That DLC story for The Last of Us was a wonderful story in that respect, and you know, stories like Gone Home as well, fantastic story. I mean, it's getting there, but we still haven't seen the big budget AAA title that has a leading LGBT character yet.
I think you're absolutely right. I think as long as, like, it comes to, like, with film as well, is like when you've got films like Marvel and the majority of their income is coming from Russia and China, then you're not going to see an LGBT character in a lead role when that's their majority of their income. And that's when you've got the Overwatchers and the big companies. I think that's not going to happen. And I think that's really sad.
Yeah, I think in regards to how the industry is doing as a whole with representation, it really depends on whether you ask this question about the indie scene or the AAA scene.
Yes.
There's a massive distinction,
Yes.
and even then it depends on whether you're discussing sexuality or gender variance, because again, a massive difference.
Yeah.
I think indie games are pretty great as a whole when it comes to representation. And it's good representation as well, not just representation regardless of the quality. It's not everywhere, but with the vast size of the indie scene, you're obviously seeing a lot more products than you would see in the AAA scene that have that good sexual orientation representation. Depiction of gender variance is getting somewhere too. There are games like... Oh no.
Always when you're on stage, always.
It's always when I'm on stage. There are games out there. There are games out there that tell good stories about gender transition and what it's like for transgender people. And it's really, really good representation. But the AAA scene is starting to get somewhere, but it's very early days. Very, very early days. Probably down to, it seems like a lot of people discuss it in the media, the idea of these large AAA industries utilising focus groups to really nail what they think would make their game sell, and we're seeing it too often because they're trying to appeal to a wide audience. I think one of you mentioned, and in appealing to that wide audience, they may feel, oh, we can't put this gay character in or this trans character in because it'll impact sales. Debatable, of course. But yeah, examples like Life is Strange and The Last of Us, as was mentioned, are nailing gay romances, certainly. But we don't really see transgender depictions in the AAA market. I think there are one or two that come to mind. One of them is the character Miranda Coma in Watch Dogs 2. She was a minor character, but the way they depicted that character was, I felt, really, really effective. It was a story that had an impact on the campaign of the main plot. It was a realistic transgender story of this large organisation being very, very bigoted towards an individual. It was a very good depiction. But we also see some representations of trans people that aren't particularly good, like Haley Abrams from Mass Effect Andromeda. At least initially in her launch, it felt like she was saying, "Hello, I am trans," reading it off of a card that she had awkwardly in her hands. And I think BioWare had to patch her conversation because of how terrible it was.
Yeah. Isn't that just Mass Effect Andromeda?
Yeah, that's just Mass Effect Andromeda, yeah. But yeah, I certainly do think certain areas in the industry are really doing good.
They're trying.
They
really are.
And other parts of the industry are starting to get to the point that you could say they're trying, I think. But there are still a few problems.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, it's great to hear you guys voice those opinions, and I'm sure a lot of you probably agree. Is there anyone here who'd like to ask the panelists a question at all? Have you got any specific opinions yourself that you'd like to share? Over there, yeah? Sorry, I'm coming. Yeah, use that one.
This is I'm not sure if it's a game question, I think it's a general media question, because I think this is more related to media, not such a problem with books, because these books and that again as a character, I don't think that's much of an issue. I think it's more of an issue with games or audio visual media, because you actually physically see a character as opposed to taking the time to read it. Do you think if there is like good representation on TV adapted to a film and a video game at the same time, do you think that would make a difference? Because this is sort of very like, oh, it's a sort of company in to do myself. I've been doing research for like 3 years, and it's been full of problems.
I think one that always stuck out for me was, this is maybe a little bit off-piste, but was Dumbledore is gay in Harry Potter. And I was like, well, that's great, and I understand that it didn't need to be part of his dialogue. But it would have been nice to have seen that when I read the stories and the books. And that's not a direct answer to your question. I think that sometimes, it's nice that people have those moments of, yeah, he can be gay, but he doesn't have to say it. It doesn't have to be explicit. But there's also the balance that actually we do need a bit of that. And when things do get translated from book to TV or film or media, those thoughts don't always carry across. They do sometimes get left out or dropped. And I think it's still really important because there's lots of people who just need those small moments of familiarity to make themselves feel like they belong. So I think when that does get dropped off, it's a shame. I think it's not always the case, but we're not quite there yet, in my opinion, about how we could just play that up a little bit stronger.
Is there any more questions? Anyone out there? Everyone's very quiet, listening to you attentively.
Yeah.
So that's just about all we have time for today, but it's been brilliant listening to you all. Thank you very much for coming. Everyone give a massive round of applause.
Yeah, so you can find us at London Gamers, or one word.
Or LondonGamers.com.
Well, yeah, and actually this is a really important last point. We got such fantastic feedback from asking the media and industry and journalists and so on for their thoughts on this exact topic we spoke about today. We just didn't have time to share even a fraction of those today on stage. So we've collected them all together, and we're going to be publishing them on a special microsite we've created, which is just DIG, Diversity in Gaming, .londongamers.com, and they will all be on there within the next week. So do check that out as well to see some of the other opinions that have been shared with us, and just to get some more thoughts on some more of the questions that we didn't have time to talk about today.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again. And just for you guys, if you're going to be leaving, then you need to use this door, this side, because the other side is for people entering. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Well done, guys.
Thank you for doing this.
Sorry, that was so short.